Uh, Today's daf Hashem is Masechta Kiddushin Daf Ayin. This is the last week of Masechta Kiddushin. We're coming to the siyum, not only the siyum of the Masechta, but the siyum of the entire Seder Nashim. So it's really a big event coming up. Okay, we're going to start from the top of the page, and the top of the page is referring to the Mishnah. And the Mishnah discusses when Ezra came up from Bavel to build the second Beis Hamikdash, he brought groups of people. And basically he took a lot of people who had problems with their lineage to join him in building the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, some of the people who had normal Jewish ancestry stayed in Bavel, but a lot of people who did not joined Ezra in this pilgrimage and campaign to build the second Beis Hamikdash. So one of the people is the Geiri v'Charurei. There were Geirim in his group and Avodim who were just freed, basically converts, not real people, Jews, who came up. Minolan, how do you know that? Amrav Chizda, Amakra, the pasuk says, "V'chol hanivdel metumas goya aretz alehem." Ezra describing the people that joined him in this campaign, he says there were people who were just separated themselves from the Tuma Goyim. That means they became Gerim. They were part of my group. Now the Gemara says, Mamzerim. He had Mamzerim join him in his group. In fact, anybody who was a big Mamzer left Bavel, came up to join Ezra to build the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says, Minolan, how do you know that? Because there's a pasuk in Nehemiah, Ezra is similar. It says, Vayishma sanvalat hachoreni and Vayitoivia ha'ever amoni. This Toivia, the slave who is an Ammon slave, okay? Remember that word. Toivia is a slave. Iksiv, and the pasuk says, Ki rabim b'Yehuda bali shvu aloi. A lot of people were sworn allegiance to this Toivia. And Ki chesan hu, he was a son-in-law l'Shechania ben Arach. He was a son-in-law to Shechania ben Arach. So basically, this Toivia, this slave, married a Jewish woman. Okay, and he was an influential person, and basically, when Ezra is going up to build the Beis Hamikdash, our worst enemies are Jewish enemies, and that's what we're discussing tonight. So he convinced Koresh not to stop this campaign because the Jews are building a second Beis Hamikdash, and they'll break away from the kingdom. So that's what this Taviyah wanted to do, and the Torah, the pasuk says that he actually had a lot of clout, and then he had the Yochanan and Benoi Lokach Zvat Mishulem Bes Brechiat, and Yochanan and his son also married a Jewish woman. So now, and their children actually joined the campaign to go up with Ezra to build the Beis Hamikdash. So Kesava, this man the Amma holds, Goy ve'eved Habal Bas Yisrael, a goy or a slave. That slave that marries a Jewish woman, Havlad Mamza, the children of Mamza. So we see in that pasuk that they must have held children that joined Ezra in this campaign and this expedition, and therefore we see that Ezra took up Mamzerim to build the Beis Hamikdash. Again, because the psukim in Ezra and Nehemiah don't say that he took a Mamzer with him. So the Gemara says like this. So you're trying to say imply that he took a mamza. That would make sense if you learn that the Eved that marries a Bas Yisrael is a Vlad Mamza. But Elaman Diyama Havlad Kosher, but according to the opinion that says the daughter, this child is a Kosher, Ma'iklamema. If the children of Tavia and Yochanan came up, their children are kosher. Just because their father was an Eved and they're married a Jewish woman, the child is a kosher kid. Visu, and how do you know? Maybe they didn't have children. Maybe they just married Jews, but they didn't have any children. And maybe they didn't have any children. Maybe when the pasuk is describing these type of people, maybe those are not people that were in Bavel. Those are people who remained in Eretz Yisrael. So they were Mamzerim who lived in Eretz Yisrael. But we're looking for joining the expedition from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. How do you know that Mamzerim came to that expedition? Ella Mahacha, the pasuk is over there in Nehemiah. There's a pasuk that says, Ve'elu ha'olam. The following people were the ones that joined the expedition to go up from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. Mitel Melech, Tel Charsha, Kruv Adon, V'imer, V'lo lahagid beis avarim v'zarim im Yisrael hey. So it describes people who came from a place called the Salt Tel, the plowed area Tel. I don't know what this means. So the Gemara Darshans Tel Melech, people from the Salt mountain. Elu b'nei Adam. These are people that joined Ezra. Shedoimim maseim lamasi doim shenepcha l'tel melech. These are people who are promiscuous people. They slept with each other's wives, and their actions was similar to the people who lived in Sodom that was turned into into a place of salt. Tel Chersha, people who are from Tel Chersha joined the expedition. Why? Cherish means quiet. These were people, Zeh Shekarin Abba, if they would ask and say, they would say to somebody, you're my father, the Imam Mishatka, and his mother would say, shh, that's not really your father. People who, they didn't even know if they're Jewish. Zehu Asufi, Shenefsef Min Ashuk. And these are Asufim, people of unknown ancestry, joined the expedition. They weren't Jewish, Goyish, you don't know where they came from. They also came part of the group that Ezra brought up. Then the pasuk says, "Kruv Adon v'imer." What does it mean? So we're going to darshan people that also is up for drasha. Amar Ababo, Amar Adon. God said like this. It looked at the group of people that were coming up with Ezra. These were the lowest of the lowest people as far as morality is concerned. And God says, Ani Amarti, I always wanted that the Jewish people should be as important to me as an angel. And they make themselves like a leopard. A leopard is a promiscuous animal, not faithful to its mate. And therefore, that's what God is complaining. I had expectations that the Jews should be like the Kruv. The Kruv is like an angel. And now they're like a nomer, like Adon Nimer. We read it together. They're making themselves like a leopard. So God is upset with this group. But Ika the Amri, just the opposite. And this is very interesting. Amar Rababo said, and this you can remember, Amar Adon, God says like this, even though they made themselves like a leopard, God says, they're so important to me, and they're so I consider them so precious to me, like an angel. No matter how sunk a Jew is, he's still precious to God, like an angel. Amar Rabba Chana said, a new story. If a man marries a woman, let's say that's not appropriate for him. Let's say he marries a Hollywood celebrity, totally liberal, not appropriate woman for somebody who's from yeshiva. So Malal of Akasav, Ki'ilu Chorshe L'Chol Kulai Uzroi Melech. The pasuk considers it as if you plowed the entire world and planted it with salt. So you destroyed any productive piece of land from ever producing a good produce. Shnema ve'elo oilam etel melech tel charsha. So we darshan that somebody who is marrying a person, somebody not appropriate, a lady, you're basically bringing children into this world, but they're not going to be appropriate children because everything goes after the mother. And even though the father is this great Talmud Chacham and is a big learner, but at the end of the day, if he's marrying a very loose type of woman, so he's not going to have good children. Amar Rabba Baravad Amarav. If you marry a woman, not because she's appropriate for you, but because she comes from a wealthy family. Rashi says this means that it's also a puzzle woman for you. It's not the appropriate wife for you, but you have ulterior motives because you want to live a comfortable life by marrying a rich lady. Then you'll see that you'll have children that are not appropriate for you. They rebelled against Hashem by not seeking out their appropriate mate, and because of that, they will have strange children. The children are not going to follow the ways of their father. But you're going to say, okay, but at least they'll have a good life living with the money. Mom and Palit, I'll be able to hold on to the money. In 1 month, in a month's time, you'll lose your portion. Maybe his portion will be lost, but maybe, like, say, the nichse melug, the stuff that remains in her name will survive. You won't be poor. Talmud loymech chelkehem, both portions, his portion and her portion, you're going to lose the money. Maybe it'll happen after many years of marriage, so at least you had this good life up until then. Talmud loymech chodesh, my mashma, Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak, chodesh nichnas v'chodesh yatsa u'mamayim avad. In 1 month comes in, a month goes out, as fast as a month, in one shot, the money is going to be lost. What it probably means that you'll suffer such a financial loss that it won't go steady, slowly down. It'll be totally disappear. You're not going to know what hit you. All because you married a woman, l'shum mamon, for money. If you marry an inappropriate woman, God, so to speak, Eliyahu Navi holds you down and ties you down, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu whips you. The Tana we learned in a Brisa, because again, a person, you have to choose your mate wisely and what's appropriate for you. Akulam Eliyahu Kaisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaisim, Eliyahu writes and God signs off on it. Oiloi, woe is to him, he's causing his children to be puzzled. He's ruining his family. And then we say like this: if you see somebody walking around disqualifying people, guy saying, "Oh, you're so to speak, come from a bad family, and you're not, your ancestry is questionable." Puzzle. You should know that that person himself is puzzle. He's disqualified because if you don't see him saying any nice things about anybody, so the fact that he's always negatively talking about somebody else's family and he never praises somebody else's family, it must be that he also has something wrong with his own family. Whatever he's disqualifying other people, that same disqualification is what he has in his own family. And the Gemara brings this long story over here. Ahu Gavra, there was this person. He was an important person, maybe a wealthy guy, and a prominent family. He came from Nadoi. He came into a butcher shop in Pumbedisa. He told the butcher store, Havali Bisra, give me meat. Amrulay, so the butcher man answered, Natar, wait, ad the shakal shamoy the Rav Yehuda by Yecheskel, until I serve the attendant of Rav Yehuda bar Yecheskel, because he was in line in front of you, and then I'll be able to serve you what your request. But he was upset that he was the second person in line. Amar, he said, Man Yehuda bashviskel the kodum le the shakal min kadmoi. Who is this Rav Yehuda from the glutton? He made fun of his Yecheskel name, and he called him Shviskeel, which is like calling somebody Yehuda the glutton one, that he's in front of me in line. And so he insulted the attendant of Rav Yehuda. Also, Amar le Rav Yehuda, so they retold this to Rav Yehuda, and this is for Kavod Torah purposes, it's almost like he insulting the Torah. Shamte, so Rabbi Yehuda put this man in Cherem. Amru, they said to Rabbi Yehuda, Rogel de Kare Anashi Avde, Achros Alei de Avdehat, that this man is always calling people slaves. You slave, you come from a slave. So Rabbi Yehuda made an announcement that this guy is a slave. Azal, so this person went, he wanted to sue Rabbi Yehuda for libel. As many ledina lekamid Rav Nachman. He had Rav Nachman send to summon Rav Yehuda to court. Aisa piskeda hasmanim. So they brought to Rav Yehuda a summons from court that he has a court case with Rav Nachman, in front of Rav Nachman, with this guy. Also, Rav Yehuda lekamid Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda went to Rav Yehuda and Rav Huna and says, "Do I have to go? Amalei izul or yezul? Do I have to go to this court case or not?" Because Rav Yehuda felt that he was more of a Talmud Chacham than even Rav Nachman, the judge. Amalei, so Rav Huna answered Rav Yehuda, you don't have to go, Mishum de Gavaraba'at, because you're a great person. Al Mishum Kar de Beinesina, Hilmzil. Because Rav Nachman, and maybe he's Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, the great Rav Nachman Yitzchak, he's a son-in-law by the president, the Nasi. Therefore, out of respect to the president, you should show up to a Din Torah in front of Rav Nachman. So Asa, Ashkechei de Ka'av and Maika. So he came, Rav Yehuda showed up to Rav Nachman suddenly, And he found Rav Nachman building a fence on his roof. He's been doing some roof work. Amalei, so he said to Rav Nachman, don't you know what Shmuel said? Once you have an important job over the tzibur, and you, Rav Nachman, being a judge, you're not allowed to do menial work in front of three people. It's disrespectful. You're demeaning yourself, right? When you see like a president demeaning himself, it's an insult to the people. So Rab Nachman said, I'm making a small fence around my roof, and this is a mitzvah. So if it's a mitzvah, I'm permitted to do it, even though I'm a judge. So you're going to see that this Rav Nachman, I'm using an English word that I found. It's called sesquipedalian, which means it's somebody who uses very fancy words unnecessarily. And you're going to see that this is how Rav Yehuda is going to point out the flaws of Rav Nachman's speech. He says, "You're telling me you made a gunderisa?" Rav Yehuda tet Rav Nachman, "Misana maka d'ksiv by raisa bechitza da'amar rabbanim." You hate using the word maka or the word bechitza. I mean, that's the better word to use. The Torah uses those words. And the Amalei, so Rav Nachman said, "Yosef mar akarfita." He said, "Sit down on the bench." Amalei, so Rav Yehuda said to Rav Nachman, "Misana safsel da'amar rabbana itztava da'amar inche." Use the vocabulary that the Rabbanim use when they describe bench is safsol or itztava or stadium that people use, but don't use akartifta. It's a fancy vocabulary word. Amalei, so Rav Nachman said, "Leikel mar esrog naga." Do you want to eat esrog? Amalei, so Rav Nachman said to Rav Yehuda said to Rav Nachman, "You're using this word esranga." Shmuel said, if you see somebody using the word esranga, you know a third of him has a bloated ego. You should use the word esrog that the Rabbanan use, or esroiga that people use. But esranga is his own type of expression, and it shows that he's a balgaiva. Amalei. So Rav Nachman said to Rav Yehuda, "Lishtemar ambanga." Why don't you drink asparagus juice? Amalei. So Rav Yehuda said, "I don't want to drink asparagus juice." Misane asparagus to kai rabbanan ampek damar ishi. Do you hate the word asparagus or do you hate the word ampek? These are more common words that people are using. Amalei. So Rav Nachman said, "Tesi doinik tashkenan." Let Doinek come, my daughter. Her name is Donig. And let her bring us drinks. Okay, Amalei. So, your daughter is going to be is going to serve us drink. Hachiyam Shmuel. So Rav Yehuda said, Shmuel said, "Ein mishtamshim be'isha." You're not allowed to use a woman as a waiter. And so Rav Nachman said, "Ketani," but she's under bas mitzvah. So Rav Yehuda answered, "Beferish Shmuel." Shmuel said explicitly, "Ein mishtamshim be'isha klal." You can't use a woman as a waiter at all. Ben gedola, ben ketano, whether she's an older woman or a small woman. Yeah. Then Rav Nachman asked, "Nishada le mar shlama liyalta." Do you want to say hello to my wife? That's what he asked him. Amalei, so Rav Yehuda said, "I don't want to say hello to your wife." Hachiyam Shmuel. Shmuel said, "Kol be'isha erva." When you hear a woman singing, that's an erva. And even though I'm going to say hello, probably the customary at that time when you said hello to a woman, she sang in a sing-song voice back to you, and that's not permitted. So Rav Nachman said, "Afshay yedei shliach." You could send a messenger to say hello to my wife. And that's nice. You're in our house. Amalei, so you said, Hachiyam Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. We go to the Amid Beis. Ein she'alim b'shloim isha al yedei ein she'alim b'shloim isha. You're not allowed to say hello to a wife of a man. That's it. You don't ask. You're not allowed to even text to them. Don't send text. What about it? Al yedei bala. So Rav Nachman said, "But I'm her husband. I'll be go to my wife and say that Rav Yehuda said hello to you." Amalei, so Rav Yehuda said, don't do that. Hachiyam Shmuel, ein she'alim b'shloim isha klal. So you're never supposed to say hello to a woman, even if it's her husband who's the go-between. So anyway, overhearing this conversation, as Rav Yehuda basically is showing how superior in learning and in speech that he is over Rav Nachman, Sholchalei Devise. So his wife sent a message to Rav Nachman Send him away because he's basically embarrassing you, and he's making you look like any other plain person. Amalei, so Rav Nachman finally said to Rav Yehuda, "My shiata de bar hacha. What brought you here? Why did you float into my house?" Amalei, tatzke das mnisa shada bar abasrei. You sent me a summons to come to your court. Amalei, so Rav Nachman said, "I sent you a summons. Ashta shusa de ma lo gemirna. Tatzke das mnusa mishadarne lemar. I don't even speak your language. You speak a language that's superior to me, so you must be much more learned. I'm going to send you a summons to come to my court." So Rabbi Yehuda apek diske dahaz manuse mi bechadya la'achrilei. He took out the summons and he showed it to him. Amalei hay gavra v'hay diska. This is my name, and this is the summons that you sent me. Amalei. So Rabbi Nachman remembered it and said, "Hoya v'asamar lahacha. Since you came here, l'shtay meli. Let's discuss what you're here for. That the people shouldn't say that Rabbanan flatter each other. They let each other go off easily." So let's see what I brought you here. So Amalei, so Rav Nachman said, my first question is, why did you put this person in Cherem? So Rav Yehuda answered, Sir Shlichud Rabbanan. He insulted my attendant, which is basically an insult to me. So Rav Nachman said, instead of putting him in Cherem, Benagdi Mar, why don't you just give him Malchus? The Rav Mangin Aman the Mitzar Shluchad Rabbanim. Rav would give whipping to somebody who insulted the messenger of any rabbi. Answers Rav Yehuda, the reason why I put him in excommunication, the Adif Menei Avidilei. I did something worse to him. I made him like nobody can take, he can't go into any synagogue. I put him in excommunication. That's more of an insult. So now the question Rav Nachman answered, then my tama achros leimar alei da'avdahu. Why did you call out to everybody that he's a slave? Amalei, and you're basically saying that nobody can marry his children. Amalei, the rogel the koreanashi avdi, the tane kol pasol, the einim adaba b'shivchel oilam. Since he was calling other people slaves, so I must be that he's a slave. Because if you see somebody disqualifying somebody else, you know that he has the same disqualifications. So the Rav Nachman said to Rav Yehuda, okay, but that's not to be taken literally. Did Rav Shmuel said you should be concerned that maybe he's a slave, maybe he's that disqualification, but to announce publicly and put it as a true in the papers that he is that disqualification? How do you know Shmuel went that far? In the meantime, all of a sudden that person came in front of the Rav Nachman to the court, and he said to Rav Yehuda, you're calling me a slave? I come from the Chashmonoim, the heroes of the story of Hanukkah. So I'm a kohen. Amalei, so Rabbi Yehuda said to this person, Hachi Amashmuel, called the Amam Beis Chashmonoim Kasina. If you say you come from the Beis Chashmonoim, Avdahu, you must be a slave. The whole family of the Chashmonoim, the heroes of Hanukkah, were all wiped out. They were all killed. And basically, Hurdas, which was the last Chashmonoim king, wasn't really from that family. He was a slave, and he killed out the whole family, took Herod the king, and he tried to marry somebody from the Chashmonoim family, but they were all dead. So he ended up marrying a maid, but he kept calling himself that he's still from the Chashmonoim family, but really he wasn't. Amalei, so Rabbi Yehuda proved this point that this guy who said he was from the Chashmonoim family must have been a slave. Amalei, so Rabbi Nachman said, but you're saying that Shmuel said that whoever comes from the Chashmonoim family must be a slave. But Amalei loy savaloi ma'al hodar araba amarav huna amarav kol tamid chacham shemayr halacha uva im koydem ma'asa amara shaymeloi v'im lav ein shaymeloi. If you're saying a statement from a great person, if you always said this statement and then something came from that statement, then you paskin like that statement. But if nobody ever heard of that statement, and now you're saying it only because a story is happening, so we don't trust that maybe the statement is true. In other words, here nobody ever heard that the Chashmonoim family were killed out. And now, because of this whole court case, Rav Yehuda brought up this point that Shmuel once said that the Hashmonaim family were killed out. Maybe Rav Yehuda cannot be trusted because this is only after a certain litigation that he's having with somebody. He's coming up with this statement of Shmuel that Shmuel says the Hashmonaim family were killed out. Amalei, so Rav Yehuda said, I didn't say it. Rav Masna was saying this for many, many years. And the Gemara says, Hashkacha Pratis, Rav Matnan Leichazan Adar Tleisa Shani. He was not here for 13 years into Nehardai. 13 years he wasn't there. But that day he showed up while Rav Yehuda is having this case with this guy in front of Rav Nachman. Rav Masna came and he happened to pay a visit to Rav Nachman. Amalei, so Rav Yehuda said to Rav Masna, do you remember what Shmuel said when he had one foot on the banks of the river and one foot on the boat? What he said? Amalei, sure, I remember what Shmuel said. If somebody says, I come from the kingdom of the Hashmonaim family, Avdahu, he's a slave. There was only one girl that survived the bloodbath, the Salkil Igra, because she and Herod wanted to marry her, but because she was the only one left, the Salkil Igra, she went to a roof, Varam Yakali, and she called out that she's the last survivor of the whole family. The Amra, and she says, called the Amra base Hashmonaim. Whoever's going to say that I come from the Hashmonaim family, Avdahu is a slave. Nafla Igra, she jumped from the roof, Umisin dies. Achris Alai, the Avdahu. So anybody who came from Herod's family was a slave because he was a slave. So therefore, the Gemara says, and I just want to, we'll finish off with one more point. First, to explain, the Hashmonaim family were punished in such a way because really they were heroes for the story of Hanukkah, but then they decided to become kings. And the Ramban explains that the kingdom family should not belong to the Kohanim; it should belong from somebody from Shevet Yehuda, and therefore, as a result, a lot of them, became, let's say, not from, almost non-Jewish, so to speak, and the rest of the family over time were killed out. Before the first century. Anyway, this guy who is now exposed as a slave, so he had a large, illustrious family. Many ksubas were ripped up, many marriages became dissolved, as it was known that this family, where this chutzpah came from, was a slave family. When Rav Yehuda was leaving, when he's leaving Nerdoi, people wanted to stone him because he revealed something that was not known before, that a whole entire illustrious family of a certain neighborhood of Nerdoi was all Avodim. Amalahu, Rav Yehuda threatened them. You want to stone me? Ishtike. If you're going to be quiet, be quiet. Viloi, Migalyan Alaichi, Hoda Amar Shmuel. I'll tell you something else what Shmuel said. Tartes Zarenesa Ikben Adoi. There's two other families in Nardoi. And the Gemara tells us what they were. But some families were called the doe family, some called the raven family. V'simanach, and I'll tell you, the ones that belong to the raven family, tame. Is a tame bird? So they're tame. Tar, the ones that belong to the doe family, which is a kosher bird, tar, they're kosher. So basically, Rav Yehuda, Shmuel, and we'll end with here. Rav Yehuda was threatening to expose other families that have pasulim in there. So the mob, don't mob me because I'll expose other families with lineage problem. So the Gemara says, Shadi lahu rigba midai. All the protesters started putting down their stones. The Ka'atmen ben Nahar Malka, and the whole river of Nahar Malka was, clogged because people threw their stones into the river. That's how many people wanted to stone him. But it ended up clogging the river. But for some reason, Rav Yehuda did not reveal other Psulim families in Nehardai. Okay, we're going to continue tomorrow with Ayin Aleph.